On October 3rd, 2024, a complaint was filed in a Los Angeles court that sent immediate shockwaves through the country music world. The woman behind it, identified in court documents only as Jane Roe, had worked as a hairstylist and makeup artist for both Garth Brooks and his wife Trisha Yearwood. She had originally been brought on by Yearwood in 1999, and Brooks added her to his personal team in 2017. According to her account, the professional relationship shifted dramatically once he learned she was facing serious financial difficulties and that he used her vulnerability as leverage. The allegations detailed in the complaint are specific and severe. Roe claimed that in 2019, Brooks invited her to travel with him to Los Angeles for a Grammy tribute event. Upon arrival, she discovered he had booked a single hotel suite with one bed for the two of them. She alleged that during that trip, Brooks sexually assaulted her. The complaint also describes a separate incident at his home, where she claims he emerged from a shower and forced her hands onto his body while making explicit remarks. The filing outlines a broader pattern of alleged behavior spanning 2019 to 2024, including sexual harassment, battery, and what her legal team characterized as a deliberate exploitation of her financial dependence on him. What made the story even more complicated was the sequence of legal responses. Before Roe filed anything publicly, Brooks had already filed his own lawsuit in Mississippi in September 2024 under the pseudonym John Doe. His legal team argued she was attempting to extort him, demanding millions of dollars in exchange for her silence. Brooks compared the situation to having a loaded gun pointed at his face, stating that paying any amount would be the equivalent of admitting guilt. He maintained clearly and firmly that he was incapable of the behavior she described. The legal maneuvering that followed was widely criticized. His team attempted to have her California case dismissed and pushed to consolidate all proceedings under Mississippi jurisdiction, a state that notably lacks anti-SLAPP protections, which would have made it significantly harder for Roe to fight back publicly. Her attorneys called the Mississippi filing a bad faith move designed purely to suppress her ability to speak. A federal judge in California denied Brooks' motion to dismiss in December 2024, though the case was temporarily paused pending the Mississippi outcome. By May 2025, the Mississippi case was declared moot, leaving the California case still unresolved. As of early 2026, both parties had requested jury trials, meaning this legal battle is far from over. To fully appreciate the magnitude of what is now unraveling, it is necessary to understand what Garth Brooks actually constructed over 3 decades. Very few artists in the history of recorded music have come close to the commercial and cultural heights he reached, and that context is essential to understanding why the current situation carries the weight it does. Brooks was born on February 7, 1962, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the youngest child in a blended family. His mother, Colleen, had been a country singer with a recording deal at Capitol Records and had appeared on Ozark Jubilee in the 1950s. His father worked as a draftsman for an oil company. The family held weekly talent nights at home where all the children were expected to perform. Brooks learned guitar and banjo as a child. Though his real passion through high school was athletics, he played football, baseball, and ran track and field, and for a time seemed more likely to pursue sports than music. The pull toward performing eventually overtook everything else. He made his first attempt at breaking into Nashville in 1985, which ended in failure. He returned to Oklahoma, enrolled at Oklahoma State University, and graduated with a degree in advertising. He tried Nashville again in 1987, and this time stayed. What separated Brooks from the hundreds of other aspiring artists who attempted the same path was not simply the quality of his voice or his songwriting. It was the way he performed. While most country acts of that era kept their stage presence relatively contained and traditional, Brooks brought something closer to a rock arena experience into country music. He leapt across stages, smashed guitars, incorporated pyrotechnics and elaborate lighting rigs, and generated the kind of kinetic, physical energy that audiences had previously only encountered at rock concerts. Record executives who initially doubted him quickly discovered they were not dealing with another traditional country act trying to fit in. He was actively rewriting what a country concert could be. His self-titled debut album arrived in 1989 and launched the climb. No Fences followed in 1990 and became one of the best-selling country albums in history. Then came Ropin' the Wind in 1991, which debuted at #1 simultaneously on both the Billboard Country Chart and the all-genre Billboard 200, a first in music history. The album did not start on the country chart and cross over. It hit both peaks at the same moment, right out of the gate. The industry had genuinely never seen anything like it. By the mid-1990s, he was filling stadiums that no country artist had previously filled. His Central Park concert in August 1997 drew an estimated 750,000 to 1 million people, making it one of the largest concert audiences in American history. He is the only artist in music history to have released 9 albums certified diamond by the Recording Industry Association of America, surpassing the previous record of 6 held by the Beatles. He has won 2 Grammy Awards, 17 American Music Awards, 22 Academy of Country Music Awards, and 10 Country Music Association Awards. He has been inducted into both the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and became the youngest recipient ever of the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize for Popular Song. His total worldwide album sales exceed 170 million, making him, by SoundScan Records, the best-selling solo artist in American music history. His net worth as of 2024 was estimated at approximately $400 million. He was not merely the biggest name in country music. He was one of the most commercially successful recording artists in the history of the entire medium. That is the platform now under serious strain. While the lawsuit was detonating in the fall of 2024, a completely separate situation had already created its own public relations damage earlier that same year, one that arrived at the worst possible moment. On March 7, 2024, Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood officially opened Friends in Low Places Bar and Honky Tonk at 411 Broadway in Nashville, right in the heart of the city's famous Lower Broadway entertainment district. The venue was enormous by any measure, spanning 54,715 square feet across 4 floors, making it the largest honky tonk on the entire strip. The first floor was built around a large live music stage. The second floor offered a balcony view of the stage and additional seating. The third floor held event space that businesses had booked years in advance. The fourth floor was an open-air rooftop bar called the Oasis, built around a beach and tropical theme. A members-only club was also tucked inside the building. Yearwood designed the food menu herself, drawing from her cookbooks and her years of work on Food Network. The project had been years in the making. Brooks had purchased the building in 2021 and spent 3 years developing it. He had spoken about the bar constantly in interviews, describing in careful detail the kind of experience he wanted to create. He said he wanted it to be the Chick-fil-A of honky-tonks, a place where people walked in and immediately felt safe, welcomed, and surrounded by people with good manners. He specifically said he wanted to hear classic country playing inside, naming George Strait and Merle Haggard as the sound he was after. He wanted it to feel like a true dive bar, just at large scale. The entire opening was documented in a docuseries that premiered on Amazon Prime Video the same day the bar opened its doors. The reviews that came back within the first 2 weeks told a sharply different story. Complaints were immediate and spread quickly across Google, Yelp, and social media. Customers described prices that felt excessive even by Broadway standards. One reviewer reported paying $37 for 2 drinks. An undisclosed entertainment surcharge was appearing on customer bills without being posted anywhere visible, generating its own wave of irritation. Some customers reported being unable to pay with cash, which struck many as particularly at odds with the honky-tonk identity the venue had been marketed around. The loudest and most consistent complaint, however, was about the music. Multiple reviewers reported that during their visits, the bar was not playing country music at all. One reviewer described hearing Flo Rida's Low. Another mentioned Apple Bottom Jeans being played during their visit. Others reported Whitney Houston covers and songs by the Cranberries. One reviewer wrote that the place had no country vibe whatsoever and described it as looking more like a New York City club than a Tennessee honky-tonk. These complaints carried particular weight, given that Brooks himself had so specifically and repeatedly described wanting classic country to define the venue's sound. Not all the feedback was negative. Some visitors praised the live bands and described the energy as excellent. But the opening week narrative had already been shaped by disappointed reviews, and those impressions spread across the internet during the same period the lawsuit became public. What a lot of coverage about the current situation tends to overlook is that Garth Brooks had already lost a meaningful portion of his core audience over a separate controversy months before the bar even opened, and well over a year before the lawsuit became public knowledge. In June 2023, Brooks was participating in a panel discussion at the Billboard Country Live event in Nashville when he mentioned that friends in low places would serve every brand of beer. At the time, Bud Light was in the middle of a massive consumer boycott driven by conservative fans after the brand had partnered with Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender influencer. Other country music artists had made very public statements against serving the brand. Kid Rock had filmed himself shooting cases of Bud Light with a rifle. John Rich and Travis Tritt had both announced they would not serve it in their venues. The conservative country music fan base had made the boycott a cultural and political statement, and many of them expected the biggest name in country music to fall in line. Brooks went in the opposite direction. He not only confirmed he would serve Bud Light at his bar, but added a comment that went viral almost immediately. He said that anyone was welcome at his bar, but they needed to come with love, and that if they couldn't do that, there were plenty of other places on Lower Broadway to go. The internet amplified that comment as Brooks essentially calling boycotters something significantly less polite, which was not quite accurate in context, but spread that way regardless. The reaction from a large portion of his fan base was swift and harsh. People posted videos of themselves throwing out Garth Brooks albums and merchandise. Forum posts and social media threads declared lifetime fan relationships over. Brooks doubled down in a Facebook live stream shortly after, saying that diversity and inclusiveness had always been who he was, and that he wasn't changing his position. For people who agreed with him, it was a rare and courageous moment for a country music star. For the portion of his audience that had been with him since the early 1990s and held deeply conservative values, it felt like a betrayal. The Bud Light situation mattered beyond the headlines it generated because it landed directly on the audience that had been the backbone of his career for 30 years. His refusal to align with that audience's position didn't just generate controversy, it reduced the number of people who considered themselves unconditional fans. And that reduction was already in place before the lawsuit arrived, before the bar opened, and before any of the other difficulties of 2024 began. None of what appears in headlines fully captures what the past 18 months have looked like for Garth Brooks personally. The picture that emerges from people in his circle is considerably darker than his public appearances have suggested. Sources close to him described a man under a level of internal pressure that had no real parallel in his career. Brooks has always been described by people who know him well as someone who reads every headline and feels every criticism deeply, even during years when criticism was minimal compared to what he faced in late 2024. The lawsuit hit differently because it was not a disagreement about music, business, or politics. It was a direct assault on his identity as a person, as a husband, and as someone who had built his entire public persona on being decent, generous, and trustworthy. Reports from people close to him during this period described elevated blood pressure, disrupted sleep, and shifts in the daily habits he had maintained for years. He was said to be relying heavily on comfort foods under the stress, with observable physical changes noted by those around him. The anger reportedly ran alongside the anxiety rather than replacing it, a deep and sustained rage at the situation, and at the fact that even a complete legal victory could not undo the reputational damage already caused by months of headlines. Trisha Yearwood became central to his ability to keep functioning during this period. People close to the couple described her as his primary anchor the person pushing back hardest against the media spiral and reminding him that his worth was not defined by what was being written about him. She stood beside him publicly at every opportunity, performing alongside him at the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter at the Washington National Cathedral in January 2025, appearing with him at the Opry 100 celebration in March of that year, and joining him when her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was unveiled. Every public appearance together was a deliberate signal of solidarity. What made the situation particularly painful was that Yearwood's name had also been drawn into the lawsuit. Roe's legal team argued in the filings that Yearwood had known about the alleged behavior and done nothing to stop it. Given that Roe had originally been her employee, the claim placed Yearwood in an extraordinarily difficult personal and professional position. She had spent decades building one of the most respected reputations in country music without any connection to scandal. Having her name attached to these proceedings was its own form of damage, entirely separate from whatever the courts might ultimately decide. Then there was the Ireland detail. In conversations with fans during late 2024, Brooks let slip that he and Yearwood had been seriously discussing buying a home in Ireland, that she had fallen in love with the country during a tour they had done there together and was pushing hard for the purchase. The comment was framed as casual real estate talk, but in the context of everything surrounding him at the time, the idea of two American icons contemplating a meaningful presence in another country landed with a different weight than it might have under quieter circumstances. By early 2026, Garth Brooks was navigating a situation that no amount of career experience could have fully prepared him for. He was managing an unresolved federal lawsuit containing the most serious allegations ever made against him publicly, the ongoing reputational aftermath of his bar's complicated launch, and a fan base that had already been fractured well before any of this began. He was not in hiding. He performed at the United States Grand Prix in Austin in October 2025, appeared at the Opry 100 celebration, continued his Las Vegas residency, and announced plans for new tour dates in 2026. His approach appeared to be to keep working and refuse to let the controversy become the reason he stopped showing up. That is a defensible position, but it also means every public appearance carries the weight of every unanswered question still circulating around his name. The California case remains the real legal battleground. Unless a settlement occurs, federal proceedings are expected to continue generating their own rounds of filings and media coverage, each procedural development becoming a new news cycle, regardless of when a trial date is finally set. His financial foundation, built across decades of record-breaking touring, royalties, and strategic partnerships, is not in immediate danger. What is threatened is something considerably harder to rebuild. The specific identity he spent 30 years constructing as not just a successful entertainer, but as a genuinely good man. The accumulation of everything that unfolded between June 2023 and early 2026 represents the most sustained and damaging period of public difficulty in his entire career. A political controversy that cost him a meaningful share of his conservative fan base. A bar opening that generated headlines about broken promises in its very first week, and a federal lawsuit that, pending resolution, will follow every public mention of his name for the foreseeable future. None of these things individually would be enough to significantly alter the legacy of someone with his record. Together, arriving in the compressed time frame they constitute something qualitatively different. And how he navigates what comes next will define the final chapter of a story that was, for most of its remarkable length, unlike anything American music had ever seen.